different
Recording in
approach
progress.
on sustainable development. So we have two ideas: the idea of SDGs on the one hand, which has been globally accepted by all countries, and then a rather limited approach, which is the Burmese Buddhist way of sustainable development. So today, I'll be focusing on the sixth session on the Buddhist way of sustainable development. I had hoped that this would provide
to find information,
a different perspective towards the sustainable development goals
Brian
that the
told
two of you especially
because why we talk
should
about
be able
why we
to
talk
recognize that the global agenda so far has been the SDGs, which has been accepted by 193 countries of the United Nations. The concept of development, of course, we now talk about sustainable development. We talk about development goals. We earlier talked about Millennium Development Goals, the MDGs. It is not new. It was based on the early 19th and 20th century. And the issue of development, we must link this to the theory of social change. If you want to have development in a country, in a region, or globally, we have to look at social change, because development is nothing but change in society, change in economics, change in behavior, change in attitudes. So the question is, what we have is, when we talk about development, it is a transition, the change from simple to complex, from less efficient to more efficient, and from ordinary to better forms. So the question is, here I would like to introduce the word change and progress. You might have change, but it might not lead necessarily to progress. So when we talk about development, we are talking about the change process, which results in progress. So I think it's important to understand that there is a link, but not a direct link between change and progress. People demand change, but change might not necessarily lead to progress. So if you are really interested in development, we're talking about change with progress. Change without progress is very familiar. We have change, but there's no progress. So what we need and what we have to recognize and we have to manage, that any change instituted must lead towards progress. So these two terms, change and progress, please remember that it is not a direct link. Oftentimes, you would have change without progress. So if you talk about development, we are talking about change with progress. So please keep this in mind. The concept of development, it would never happen overnight. It is a process because it is based on human wants and aspirations. All of us, including the two of you and the others, the observers, all of us have human wants and aspiration. And if these wants and aspirations are satisfied, we can say we are developed. So the question of economic development, higher production, this is traditional economics, exploitation of natural resources, but it also, as I have mentioned repeatedly throughout the 6 sessions, it leads to mindless exploitation and consumption, which has damaging effect on the environment. So the question then becomes, what is the path to development we want? We want consumption, we want production, we want industrial growth. And of course, we also want technological advancement. But please do not forget, all these comes at a price. If we have consumption, production, industrial growth, and technology development, invariably it would harm the environment. Invariably, it would affect natural resources. Invariably, it would hurt human behavior and attitudes. And therefore, we are now talking about human and social development. We cannot leave economic development alone. We have to look into human and social development. So this is why today we need to look at social changes, environmental changes, economic changes, political changes, psychological changes. All these results from development, which is driven by economic growth. We have focused too much on economic growth, and because of that focus on economic growth, it results in negative social, environmental, economic, political, and psychological problems. As I had repeatedly told you, even in the very rich countries, people are sick mentally. In very rich countries, they have political problems, they have social problems, they have environmental problems, because they were looking for development only through economic growth. This is why we have been seeing, and even in many developing countries, in the poor countries, they are forcing us to look into higher production. They are forcing us to exploit natural resources. And this means that the mindless exploitation and path of consumption has negative effects on the environment. So you have to understand the engine of development. If we use the engine of development only as economic development, it is bound to result in environmental degradation. It is bound to result in political, social, economic malaise. And therefore, we then start talking about, is there a different way of economic development? And the humankind, the world community, started looking into what is a new type of development we want for everybody. So the question then becomes, in 1972, in Stockholm, Sweden, we had the first UN conference on human environment. So please note this term, human environment, because normally the two terms are separated, but this time in the UN conference, they are linking the two elements of human beings and the environment. And for the first time in 1972, we're talking about environmental friendly development. So this is very critical, that we need to talk about development, not just economic development, not just technological development. We are now talking about environmental friendly development. And therefore, since 2000, we have two global initiatives. The first is the MDGs, Millennium Development Goals, from 2000 to 2015. And the second is Sustainable Development Goals from 2015 to 2030. So based on these fundamentals of economic development, based on the fundamentals that there's been a change in outlook, there's been a change in thinking. We are now talking about sustainable development. I now turn to Buddhist sustainable development. And here we can use Buddhist principles, Dhamma principles, foundations. Buddhist sustainable happiness is both at the mind and the wisdom levels. And therefore, the Brundtland Report, this is the Prime Minister of Norway, which reported on sustainable development. They are now talking about a different direction, a new direction in the process of development. And this is something that the two of you must really understand. Sustainable development means two things: meeting the needs of the present Of course, we must feed people who are living. This is important. But without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. For example, if we do whatever we need for our present generation and do not leave any for future development or future generation, this is not sustainable development. So, especially for the two of you, let me give you an example of Norway. Norway, as you know, is the world's largest producer of natural gas. In the North Sea, in Norway, they have millions of tons of natural gas. What they have decided is whatever income they will get from the sale of natural gas, they would leave 50% of the revenues from the sale of the natural gas into what is called the fund for future generations. This is a classic example of sustainable development. 50% is used for the present generation, but the remaining 50% is left in reserve for the use of future generation. So you can see that this is a concrete example, a practical example of what Mrs. Brundtland talks about when she talks about sustainable development. It is development that meets the needs of the present. 50% for people who are alive today, and 50% for people who are not yet born. So the question for the two of you, when we talk about Buddhist sustainable development, we must think of people who are not yet born. You might say, why should we think of people who are not born yet? Should we not only focus on people who are alive? That is not sustainable development. Sustainable development is looking both at those that are alive today and those that are still yet to be born. So please bear this in mind when we talk about sustainable development. Therefore, the first is the 1992, what they call the Agenda 21. This is based in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. It is an ecological based concept. For the first time, people are using the word ecology. Ecology is the question of the environment and the humankind, the interaction between the human beings and the environment. So let me turn to the Buddhist concept of being. I'm sure Uzim knows this. Manam also probably would know it. The three signs of being in the Buddhist this is the heart of Buddhist teaching. I do not want to preach to the monks who already know more than I do. But if you look at the Buddhist teaching, the heart of teaching of Buddha is based on the three signs of being. The first sign, the three fundamental characteristics of a human being. What does a human being involve? What do we mean when we say we are a human being? The first is impermanence. Of course, this is the essence of Buddhism. Nothing is permanent. Everything is permanent. What you see now, what I see now, is just for a fleeting moment. It would not last, it would change. So nothing is permanent. So the law of impermanence is very important for Buddhism. And of course, Buddhist way of sustainable development. The second thing is unsatisfactoriness. We will never be completely satisfied. We would always be unsatisfied. This is something we have to accept, that humankind would not be. Can you be satisfied with one car? with one house, with one wife, we are never satisfied. So the question of unsatisfactoriness is the second fundamental characteristic. And the third one, Uzim probably knows it better, the lack of permanent self. As a human being, we have a lot of ego. Our egos are very big, but we have to accept and recognize the lack of permanent self. So based on these three signs of being, this is why Lord Buddha teaches us to lead life along the middle path. Here is a simple word, but so complex and so deep and so profound. The word is choice. You, I, each of us would need to make a choice. No one can force you to attend my lectures. Two of you had made the choice to study Buddhist economics. So please remind yourself that we as human beings has the right to make our own choice. Whether it is right, you might regret, two of you might regret that you have chosen Buddhist economists. I don't know. But the question is, you have made the choice. And therefore, the question is, the eightfold path, which I've discussed earlier, the right livelihood. This is the path that leads to cessation of suffering. And therefore, we need, as Buddhist economics, when we study Buddhist economics, the three abilities. These are synergistic. These are linked to one another. We need morality. For the first time, you are now introducing in economics morality. In business, we now have business ethics. Ethics becomes a very important part of doing business. You cannot be doing business unethically. So the question of importance of ethics and morality in economics is based on the Tila foundations of Buddhism. The second thing is concentration. And of course, the third is wisdom. So the three synergistic abilities, I think the two students, morality, concentration, and wisdom, Tila, Tamadi, and Pija, these are the crux of the teachings of Buddha. And therefore, when we talk about development, we can now use the concept of Buddhism, the concept of morality, the concept of concentration, the concept of wisdom to make the right choices for development. And therefore, what is the difference between Buddhist way of sustainable development and the traditional way of development? There are three main differences. The first is we look into the inner spiritual progress. It is not enough just to be satisfied with the exterior material progress. We as human beings must look into the inner and the spiritual progress. The second is we must look at our character. This is why purification of human character is an important. This is related to morality. This is related to wisdom. This is related to concentration. And therefore, the final one, this is the direct link from the concept of Buddhist development towards sustainable development. We believe and we accept that development is not sustainable. And therefore, we must try to achieve sustainable development. This is why it is important. I have repeatedly talked to you about interdependent. We have to understand that we as human beings are linked to one another. This is why Buddhist virtues, precepts, principles are important. for peace, for happiness, harmony, compassion, wisdom, care, sharing, all the terms that you are aware of. So please bear in mind that these are important Buddhist values which we can bring towards the concept of development. I try to make it attractive for you to understand what I mean. When we talk about Buddhist concept of development, it is like a bee, the bees. They collect honey from flowers. I'm sure in Taungji and the Shan state, you have a lot of bees, you have a lot of honey. They collect honey from flowers. But please remind yourself, the bees never harm the flowers where they gather nectar. This is important. We as human beings should look to bees as a model. We get honey, we get nectar from the flowers, the bees. It helps in the process of pollination. And therefore, it is for us, human beings, to find happiness, fulfillment in life without harming the natural world. So we must take lessons from nature. If the bees can do it, why not human beings? So bees is an excellent example of sustainable development. So the Buddhist concept of development is nature is not there for our benefit. That we have to accept the right of other beings to live. Mosquitoes, drugs, bugs, flowers, snakes, all these, we have to live in harmony. Human beings with animals and also with the plant life. I tried to find the images from the internet and I find it very gratifying, and I'm sure you will enjoy this. Look at the picture. This is the concept of Buddhist development. We protect, we do not harm nature. We protect, we cherish nature. That is the concept of development. So the question is, it is like a branch. We cannot break the branch to provide shade. Cutting a tree is a violent act. If you harm the tree, you're harming yourself. So the question is, we believe we can do whatever we want. We can cut down branches, we can cut down trees. What does it lead towards? Self-alienation. We think we can do anything if it is for our self-interest. Without thinking, by harming the trees, we are harming ourselves. By harming the seas, the water, the forest, we're harming ourselves. By harming other animals, we're harming ourselves, which means it leads to deforestation, water pollution, lack of sanitation, proper irrigation. So this is where the middle path. Please do not think lightly of the middle path. We are not talking about extremism. Now, the two of you, the other day I was listening to Siaro Zotika. I'm sure you have heard his sermons. He talks about meditation. And what he says is related to this. He said, Buddhism and ism cannot be used together because Buddhism is not an ism, because it is a balance between spirituality and materialism. We are not saying get rid of all the material things. We are not saying get rid of all the spiritual things. We're saying there must be a proper balance between spirituality and materialism. It is for each of us to make that choice. I will again repeat myself. It is a personal choice that we have to take to lead a contented life. I like the principle of sharing and caring. The two of you know I spend my time trying to read and then trying to share what I have. Again, two of you, let me remind, sharing and caring is what make life meaningful. If you do not share and if you do not care for human beings, you are not fit to be alive. So the question is, Buddhist thoughts are not just for meditation. It is for everyday behavior. How do we behave in the marketplace? How do we behave in the workplace? How do we behave? You must be saying your prayers. You must be meditating every day. You must be going to pagodas every morning. And yet, if you are not practicing, if you are practicing violent acts, then you are not a true Buddhist middle path. So this means we have to practice the four boundless states of metta, loving kindness. I wish we had more metta in our societies, in our environment, in our schools, in our universities, in our workplaces. Loving kindness. It is not just kindness. It is not just loving. It is the combination of being kind. As I mentioned to you earlier, you remember, Dalai Lama teaches us to be kind whenever possible. And he reminded us, it is always possible to be kind. Please do not forget this. Loving kindness, compassion, karuna. We have to think of others. I teach courses on empathy, emotional intelligence, which is nothing but compassion. Sympathetic joy, which is mudita. So metta, karuna, mudita. And then equanimity, upekha. Of course, Uzin would know this. I did not remind you. Mana also knows this. But let us remind that the metta, karuna, mudita, and upekha are the basic states of the Buddhist middle path. And therefore, I will now turn to sufficiency economy. The link between sustainable development and what has happened in Thailand, what the king, it was conceived and developed. I've mentioned it earlier in my earlier sessions, but today I will go into slightly more detail because this links to sustainable development. He did not call it sustainable development. He called it sufficiency economy. The principles are the same. The outlook is the same. And the approach is the same. But he used everything based on Buddhist principles. The goal is to have development. To have development which is balanced and which is stable. And here he introduced something which I hope you will take note at 4 levels. At the level of the individual, at the level of the family, at the level of the community, and at the level of the society. Please remind yourself that we have to look into development at all levels. The levels are within each of us at the individual level, within the family, within the community, and within our society. Society, not just national society, but also include global society. And therefore, we have critical challenges all around us. Therefore, because of these challenges, there are material, social, environment, and cultural conditions. They have changed. Our culture has changed. Myanmar culture has changed since Bagan times. We have to understand this. Our material conditions have changed. Our social conditions, our environmental conditions have also changed. And therefore, we need to look into and how do we cope. So the principle of sufficiency economy developed in Thailand, it is the middle path in terms of development. It talks about 3 things. thoughts, behaviors, and action. I might even add words too. We must avoid extreme thoughts, extreme words, extreme behavior, extreme action. Any extremism should not be allowed. We are talking about the balance, the middle way. So the Sufficiency Economy philosophy of Thailand, which is based on the Sufficiency Economy, is three components. Moderation. I think moderation is something that all Buddhists understand. Everything should be in moderation. We must have a balance. We must not be at the extreme. The second is to be reasonable. We cannot be unreasonable. We cannot only think of ourselves. The third is self-immunity. We must take care of ourselves. We must be careful of the way we live our own lives. Therefore, based on these three conditions, let me repeat, moderation, reasonableness, and self-immunity, we talk about appropriate knowledge. Very much the pinya, the wisdom. We need knowledge, and then lila, which is the ethics and the virtues. So you would understand that the sufficiency philosophy established by the king of Thailand is very much based on the Buddhist principles that I've alluded to earlier. So it means everything is fluid, everything is impermanent, everything is dynamic, the situations change, the circumstances change, and therefore what we have to do is changes in material circumstances. Some of you might have savings for financial risks. We have to look at future plans for us. But we also have social changes. What we need is unity among people through contentment and feeling of peace. Peace, contentment is critical. And therefore, we also have environmental changes. We have to understand the impact of the environment. We have to live in harmony with nature. And then the cultural changes. We cannot stop modernization. If you look at yourself, the way you dress today is very different from the people that dressed even in Myanmar 100 years ago. We have changed our attitudes. Our heritage have changed. This is important to accept this. And therefore, to cope with these changes, what is essential is knowledge. Without knowledge, without wisdom, and of course, we need to have the moral compass, which is ethics and virtues to foster human development. So what we have is, based on this, the sufficiency economy in Thailand focuses on alleviating poverty, which is the first goal of the SDGs. It also looks at economic vulnerability of the poor, which is again hunger and poverty. It talks about community employment, empowerment. Do not forget individual, family, community, and society. So what they said in Thailand is to look at the communities as foundations of local economy. So this is why they have one tumble, one product programs, so that they are looking into the local economy. They are strengthening communities through sufficiency economy. It also means CSR, corporate responsibility, to new levels. Businesses in any country owes it to the community to strengthen it. It looks at profit, but it must make sure it is a long-term profitability. It is important that the way companies are governed is important. They must be immunized from shocks. They must create better policies in a company, and companies must lead to sustainable growth. Here is something the two of you should understand. When we say good governance, I'm not talking about good government. I'm not talking about governance. I'm talking about governance. Governance means how do we manage ourselves in the company, in the institutions. For example, at SSBU, if Oxford Seattle is exercising good governance, it means it must be accountable, it must be transparent, it must be responsible, it must be equitable, it must be effective, it must follow the rules of law, it must be participatory, it must not be decided by one person, everyone should be involved, and consensus orientation. These are the 8 principles of good governance, either for companies or for institutions. These are important. And therefore, sufficiency economy is trying to transform human lives. But it is not enough at the physical level. It is at the mindset, mental level. It is important and necessary for the advancement of human development. So what they now have is SEP, Sufficiency Economy philosophy. This is the philosophy upon which sufficiency economy is based. It uses sustainable framework like the UN framework, but it looks at interrelationship with economy, society, environment through Buddhist perspective. And therefore, they look at companies using sustainability through SEP. The issue of sustain Dhamma. How do we sustain? How is the middle path between two extremes? Maximum growth, minimum utility or indulgence. This is the two extremes, and Buddhist economist sustainable development is the balance, the middle way between the two extremes. Therefore, the 3 principles of SCPs are moderation, reasonableness, and self-immunity, as I've earlier alluded to. It is not a new framework. It is an old framework used based on the Buddhist principle. So it is a historical concept of Buddhism. Therefore, we must understand that human beings are tightly linked, interdependent with nature, and therefore it is a different way of worldview. The SCP is a radical departure from the modern way of looking at development. This is why I would like to capture this SCP, 3 primary elements: moderation, reasonableness, prudence, self-immunity, which is based on knowledge and morality. This is the only way we can achieve sustainable economic development through using SCPs. The question is, moderation is something that as Buddhists, we always try to aspire to. How do we reduce our desires, self-interest, and overindulgence? How do we practice responsible consumption and production? We look at self-concept. We try to get rid of ego, the egos that lead us to overexploit resources. This is cyclical thinking. What we have is a cycle that it comes back. If you do something, it is related to someone else. By indulging yourself, it harms other suffering. It also leads back to your own suffering. So this is why we have to look at karma as a cycle, as a never-ending cycle. So it is a Buddhist approach to looking at relationships. Self-immunity, prudence, we have to protect ourselves from extremes. And therefore, communities have to protect themselves to natural disasters, and they have to get back to pre-disaster state. So self-immunity is based on mindfulness and karma. It looks at external threats and risks, and will look at abnormal environmental changes. So SCP is a basic idea of Buddhist way of sustainable development. It forms national economic policy in Thailand. It has been deeply entrenched in the Thai way of life. And therefore, let me be careful. Our world and well-being depend on a shift in our priorities. What is our priority? If our priority is compassion, if our priority is love and kindness, then we will not make the wrong choices that we have made. If our priority is self-interest, then we will damage the environment at the expense of nature. I thank you for your attention, and I leave the floor for any discussion and follow-up observations.
Yes, Sajid, I come across with your interesting presentation or your lecture. I understand before that I have come to study the Buddhist Economics. I never thought that the middle way is linked to the middle way can link to the economic development, as you has mentioned, and maybe some many people still are confused, and also the middle way can we can apply the middle way to develop our sustainable development and to grow the prosperity. So I have, as you have mentioned in your PowerPoint slide, like the King Rama IX has established development sufficiency economic. Many very useful, the organization useful in not only in Thailand but also in Shan State as well. As you can see, maybe you have we call it is a WOMETA. It's an organization. Since 2013, many people in Shan State go to Thailand, and they have they collect the including monks. The including monks go to Thailand, and they have a big meeting. They went to study about the sustainable economic and how to manage the money, how to for example, deposit account. And they have the policy to invest and to find how can I say to involve in the deposit account. So still in Shan State there are many groups almost everywhere in Shan State now are useful. So as we can see here, we can see that the understanding is the Sila, Samadhi, and Panya. They're still useful. Nobody cannot steal or bankrupt because there has no the bank. You need to put your money in the and then you can borrow the money, and there has many system that you can borrow the money. So you might have heard that one. What I recognize that one is a sustainable development is very useful in Shan State. but many people may not recognize, and that is a meta way, Buddhist economics way. So this is not a question, but the question may come later.
I think it was, I had the opportunity to visit the sufficiency villages in Thailand myself. I was taken around. Of course, one thing that is very important in your intervention, that when we send people to look at the Thai experiment, what King Rama IX have done, we tend to forget the underlying rationale. The underlying rationale is not just development, it's just not banking, but the underlying development is what you rightly pointed out, the middle way, moderation. So I think this is something that oftentimes is lost in people that visit the sufficiency villages. They look at the products, one tumble, one product, etc. They look at the banks, etc. But they forget to appreciate the basic underlying principles of the middle way. It is not extremism, it is moderation, it is loving kindness. So I think this is important, that I do hope in the Shan state, if they are using the Thai models, I think because of the cultures are very similar, I do hope that they would also focus or highlight the Buddhist principles of the middle way, because the middle way is something that makes it unique. Otherwise, if you manufacture textiles, for example, local textiles, the Shan have very good textiles, very much like the Thais. But we are not planning to have a huge factory to produce the textiles. What we're saying is the middle way. How do we protect the environment? Why do we not have huge factories in the Shan state to produce textiles? So what we have to have is a clear understanding and a change in the mindset that it is based on Buddhist thinking, Buddhist ideas, and the basic idea is the middle way. The middle way between the spiritual side and the material side. My worry, Uze, is this. My worry is that when people go to Thailand to observe and then try to replicate back in the Shan state, they should also bring back the Buddhist philosophy, the Buddhist ideas. It is not just the way the banks are structured. It is not just the way the goods are produced. It is the middle path, as you mentioned. It is the basic Buddhist principles, which can often be lost if we are not careful. So thank you for raising this, because I think it's important that the Shan community are adopting the principles. I think we should encourage, but at the same time remind them that behind the basic of economic development is the foundations of Buddhist philosophy, which is the middle path. But thank you for raising this issue.
Yes, I understand your explanation. Now is they went to Thailand and they observed the framework and the system, and they bring back to Shan state, but they better have they better have to produce the domesticate to sell, and also they need that framework. I think.
Yes, I think this is some of what I'm missing. They might say, okay, let us breed chickens, let us breed pigs, but the question is, how many pigs will be enough? Do you want to then have a factory, or do you want to have a factory for chicken farms? So the middle way does not say this. The middle way is sufficiency economy. So what you can design which does not harm the environment, which does not harm others. So this is something which we have to struggle with. And I think it's important. And I thank you for raising this issue. Do you have any observation, Mana?
Can you explain the slide of good governance? Because at that time the outside is very noisy, and then I can't hear well.
No, let me try. Let me try.
Good governance. There is construction outside.
Let me start again, huh?
Yeah.
Can you see it? Can you see the slides?
Yes.
Okay, then I go to. So
Yes.
this slide you mentioned now.
Yes.
There are 8 dimensions of good governance. So good governance does not mean good government. So there is a distinction we have to make between government and governance. So governance is the means of governing. You can have governance in Shan State Buddhist University. You can have governance in your company. You can have governance in your household. Governance is across different levels. So the 8 dimensions of good governance are, the first is accountability. We have to be accountable for our tasks, for our role, for our objectives. Accountability is the first dimension. The second is transparency. Anything we know should be made known to everyone. There are no hidden secrets. Transparency is very important. The third is responsive. Because if a customer comes to your shop, you must provide the customer what he or she needs. You must not be slow. You must be quick, efficient to respond. The fourth element is important, equitable. It has to be on equitable basis and inclusive. You cannot say you cannot come to my shop because you are not a Buddhist. You cannot do this. It must be inclusive. Then economic principles of effectiveness and efficiency. Rule of law is important. We must bring everyone together, participatory. And finally, we must get consensus that everyone agrees to a decision. So it has been found that these 8 dimensions of good governance forms the basic for companies, for factories, for institutions, even like SSBU, Shan State Buddhist universities. You should have all the 8 dimensions. I hope this is clear for you.
Yes, thank you, Sergey.
Sergey, can I ask one more question?
Please, of course.
I'm curious what you say that the sustainable development is concerned about sometimes for me to express to another person. For example, in the villages, many people are lack of knowledge and lack of understanding about the Buddhist economics, and very difficult to them. And myself, not as a business man, so it's difficult to explain to them, especially when they are, they are doing farming. They are using a lot of chemical. No more natural fertilizer. I mean, they no longer using the fertilizer. yes, Noachi or Jachi or something like that. They no more use this. That is they harm harm the soil. Chemical, as you know, harming the soil, and they are using a lot of as they doing the farm in the many farmer, they don't know anything at all. They just want to produce their they just want to produce more and want to get quickly as fast as they can. They don't care anything about the animals, yes. So I explained to them many many cases, but they don't understand they don't even respect and my words, and sometimes because I'm as a monk, and maybe they think that I know nothing about the using this one, and they're more using about the machine to do to do farming very quickly. Of course, this is okay, I say, but you are using a chemical. Is for example, today, this year you use 2 or 3 packs chemicals, and maybe next year you will use more. You will use more than maybe 6 or 7 packets like this. Then they still do not understand I don't know how to inspire by them. So which way or which way you want to inspire me to explain to them in effective way?
Thank you, Hussein. I think this is very important.
Yes.
Because when we deal with the farmers who will be less educated, who are focused on their current conditions, they want to make money. We must understand their conditions. We must understand their situation. They have a lot of family, many children. They want to have education for the children. And therefore, for them, what they need is quick returns on what they get. So what they have found in the past, that if you use chemicals, if you use pesticides, plants grow more quicker, then they can go to the market and they get money. So for them, because they are poor, their vision is very short term. They cannot think long term. So this is the major problem, that they think their mind is very focused on very short term economic interests, and we cannot blame them. We should understand and appreciate them. But then, for you, I would like to suggest that if you listen to them and then try to understand why they are doing this without telling them what they should do, we should start suggesting. Because nowadays, as you know, the world market is huge for organic, for naturally grown vegetables and from the farms. Because the world prices of organic food is 10 times more than food which is grown with chemicals and pesticide. So what we need to teach them and to tell them is, if you grow none, if you avoid using fertilizers, if you avoid using chemicals, then your produce would not be many, but would be of quality. So for you, I think the challenge is quality and quantity. Without using fertilizers, they will not produce in volume, but whatever they produce will be of higher quality, which will fetch higher prices in the market. By the way, this is what the Thai villagers are doing. The Thai villages are making sure that everything is organic, everything is natural. So when they send to the market, they can advertise that this has no pollution, no chemicals, natural water, etc. So the consumers are changing their behavior attitude too. The consumers are more aware of the health benefits of consuming natural grown organic material. So in the United States, for example, if you go to the supermarket in the United States, the consumers are demanding organic grown fruits and vegetables. So the whole farming community has moved away from the quantity approach to quality approach. And I think we would have to educate them. We would have to be very patient with them. We would have to understand where they are coming from. And of course, this is a very difficult issue. As you know, in the Shan State, I've been there too. There are many companies advertising fertilizers, chemicals, because this is the way to make money. But if you are responsible, the business people should understand that this is harming the environment. This is a violent act to use chemicals or fertilizers. We can use fertilizers, the middle way, which are natural fertilizers. As you say, Tauchi and others. There are many ways of using organic fertilizers. Natural fertilizers are also available. As you know, they are using other means of getting energy, using the cow dung, produce biogas. So the question is, the biogas production is now being increased in many rural communities. So I do hope, Usin, if you can talk with them, share with them that this is a way forward, that if you want to get higher prices, you must increase the quality. And I think, of course, you would have to also convince the supply chain. Because you see, it is not just the farmers. It is the people, the middlemen who comes in. And it is the big business people. So you have to really educate the whole entire supply chain to move towards. And I think Thailand has done this. Thailand has been very successful looking at the supply chain. So if you look at the what they call the villages, the self-sufficiency villages, their produce are certified as fertilizer free. They are certified as chemical free, and therefore they fetch a much higher price in the local markets. So this is the way that we should change the environment. We should change the marketplace and the workplace too. So we would have to empower the farmers. We will have to educate them that there is another way, because for them, they do not see an alternative, because they want to improve the lives of their families. All they think is income. But we have to convince them that income alone is not enough. Money alone is not enough. The question is sustainability. If they keep on using fertilizers all the time, the soil will be destroyed. And therefore, as you said, you would have to put more and more and more and get less and less and less. So we have to tell them that it is harmful for them, not for us. It is harmful for them to keep on repeating these sort of violent acts of using chemicals, using pesticides, and not using organic material. I hope you can do this, Usin. Please.
Thank you.
If Latusa and Pompo finish, may I ask the questions?
Of course.
I have many questions, but when I'm given the green light from SSBU, I would like to ask you more. But at the moment, from today's lecture, the Pompo Usotika said that Buddhist and Islam cannot use together. I would like to more about this, because Buddhism is defined as the Eastern religion. taught by the Buddha. So maybe they make it as the Mahayana or Buddhist and Islam cannot combine together. I would like to learn more about this concept. Thank you, Sia.
The issue is ism. Ism, extremism. There are many ways of isms. This is a belief. But I think Seattle is reminding us that Buddhism is not a belief. It is not a blind faith. It is examining yourself, trying to seek knowledge and truth in yourself. So this is why he is making a departure, that Buddhism is a middle path, a non-violent path. It is not extreme one way or the other. It is always in moderation. It always talks about impermanence. And therefore, when we say ism to many people means this is the absolute truth. So there is no such thing as absolute truth in Buddhism as I understand it. It is not related to Mahayana or Hinayana. It is related to the way Buddhism is seen as a religion of moderation, a religion of middle path, avoiding the two extremes, whatever extremes they are, the left, the right, always in the middle, always based on the ideas and the basic principles of knowledge, wisdom, based on Tila, which is the very important issue of morality, on ethics. So I think this is why I feel that Buddhism is not, it is a living religion. It is not based on absolute faith. It is based on your own examination of yourself in light of your experiences. And we are not teaching others to do what they ought to be doing, but they themselves should make the choice. So the question to me, and I think this is what the Buddhist Economics on social sustainable development is, the personal choice. I cannot tell you what to do. It is you who would have to decide what is best for you based on your understanding of Buddhism. So this is my personal interpretation. I may be wrong, but I feel that to me, this means that I would always need to learn. I would always need to reflection. Whatever I say might not be true, and yet I would always need to re-examine, and to mindfulness to me is important. So if you are mindful, you do not think of others, but you think of yourself. You do not think of trying to tell others what to do, what not to do. It is their choice. It is your choice to decide how you want to live your life. And coming back to Buddhist economists, the departure is the inner and the outer, the material and the spiritual. This is the combination we seek. As Uzain has mentioned, this is why I hope we would always keep in mind that Buddhist economists is not just the material development. It is also the inner development, which is a spiritual development. And this is why in the Shan state, villages, we should always encourage them. Look at material, but do not forget the spiritual. We cannot ask them to forget the material at the expense of spiritual. It has to have a correct balance, and they have to make the choice. I hope that would address your question.
So thank you. So I think it is safer to use teaching of Buddha. It's better, that's safer than the Buddhism, right? So this is something that I learned from you, to use the correct usage, to be pointed out from the other side. Like to add, it's not a question, to add, the Pompo just say that an organic farm, My friend from Singapore and I went shopping together, and we bought the guava. I bought a very beautiful guava, which is only 20 baht. And my friend Singaporean chose a very ugly. It's not beautiful. We can found in Myanmar, even in my garden, and it is 1 kilo 100 baht. So I bought for 20 baht per kilo, and she bought 100 baht per kilo, which is not at all beautiful. This is because she said that this is organic farm. So that is why organic farm is very highly value added in elsewhere, but for Myanmar, so this is very harmful for the environmental damage. And also in Chan State, I noticed that in the inlay pond, usually they use they use the feed, but now they use the machine and the dasi, the gasoline, imported from China, which is very cheap one. It's not the very high quality. So it is in the water. So this killed the natural plantation and it is damaging now. So I'm not sure who should we inform and who should take responsibility, like the higher responsibility. It is very inconvenient truth. It is destroying for the market economy. You see, so long tail boat driver, they said that using the feed, it's very slow. So if they use a machine, they can get for 4 or 5 passengers trip per hour. So that is why. So this is for them to benefit and using the cheap gasoline imported from China. So this is very sad, but it's true. What is happening in Shan State now, especially in Limpon. Just add up, Pompong, what you said about this. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is also related to the consumers. You know, it is not just the producer side. We have to look at both the consumption and the production. When Nimbuhan mentioned about her Singaporean friend who's willing to pay 5 times the price of a guava because it is organic, this is the kind of choice we want consumers to make. That the consumers would buy things which do not harm the environment. They will naturally have to pay more for the guava. As you mentioned, she pays 100 where you pay only 20, 5 times more. But yet, she is a responsible consumer. So when we look at economics, let us not forget the 2 sides of the equation. It is not just the producers, it is the consumers too. For example, as all of us understand, cooking oil, for example, every Myanmar household uses cooking oil to cook our food. Now, of course, what is the cheapest in the market? Palm oil. But then if you look at how palm oil is produced, it is done by deforestation. It is done by harmful practices. So it is for the consumer to make a choice that I will not buy palm oil even if it is cheap because I would not like to support. So this is a choice I think all of us would have to make. Now, let me give you one example. I do not know in SSBU, for example, just a simple example. Nowadays, we look at convenience. So even for drinking water, I'm old enough to know that even in a modern house like my parents, we still have water pots made from clay. We don't have it anymore. Many modern houses, they use plastic water bottles because it is very convenient. You know, even in SSBU, when I was there, I was told, you know, when we had after CRO has finished his son, when we had the food, we are given these little water bottles or plastic water bottles. Now, the question then is, can we not replace the plastic bottles with renewable, reusable glass pitchers of water? This is a very simple change. And yet, people are not willing. It is not the villagers, even the educated people still like convenience, still do not want to make that change. Okay, I will not use plastic because plastic hurts the environment. I would use glasses, which can be reused, which can be recycled. So the question is, the consumers also are responsible. This is why in the SDGs, you will remember that there's one goal which says responsible consumption and production. And therefore, this is an issue. Now, let me again come back to practical example. So when I talk about ethics, when I talk about morality, when I have lectures and seminars with the business people, let me share with you one question. It is very similar to what Uzen mentioned. The business person says, this is in Mandalay. Yeah, I operate a cooking oil business. No, I try to make my oil of high quality, peanut oil. So it is genuine peanut oil, which has no other additives. She says, my neighbor shop, they are adding impure other lower forms of oil. They are getting money because the price is lower than the real high quality peanut oil. Here is something I want you to remember. By contaminating the oil, because the price is low, there might be people who want to use the lower price oil. But in the long term, that lower price oil is very harmful. So the responsible consumer would not use the low quality cooking oil, but try to make the choice of using high quality, even if it is slightly more expensive. So the question is, please tell your farmers, please tell your business people, businesses is in the long term. We are not thinking only short term. If you think long term, this is why the word sustainable means long term. So sustainable business means the business will be there for a long, long time. But if you keep on adding chemicals and fertilizers, pretty soon the earth, the soil will be destroyed and they cannot grow anything anymore in those. So if you think a long term, they should change, they should rethink what they are doing. I hope you can get the message to them.
So actually, SSBU has a policy. When I first arrived, come back here to SSBU in 2020, I think around June, July, Seattle has a policy of the plastic campaign. We cannot use the plastic, the reduction. But then again, when we have the meditation in the Dhamma hall, a lot of outsider come and Seattle cannot go against the flow and everyone use the plastic bottle a lot. And Seattle look at the bottle and very disappointed face, oh, a lot of plastic. Seattle tried to use this plastic campaign in the earlier time, but not successful at the moment, I think.
So I think this is the word would be sustainable. See, what we are talking about when we say sustainable, so if you want to get rid of or reduce plastic, you need real conviction and commitment long term, because people would choose the easy path. Never forget, if there's a choice between the easy and the right, I hope you would always choose the right, not the easy. This is sustainability, because it is very easy to choose fertilizers, but it is not right. It is very easy to choose plastic, but it is not right. So I would like to encourage you, make the choice which is right and not which is easy. Using plastic is easy. Using fertilizer is easy, but it is not right. So as Buddhist morality, we are all about truth. We are all about doing the right things, even if the right things are difficult. So I think in SSBU, I hope Seattle would insist that it is not easy, but it is right not to use plastic. This is something that all of us should help Seattle promote this plastic-free environment, or whatever harms the plastic is one example, and there are many examples. For example, use of air conditioners. For example, use of electricity. How do we ensure that we can protect? I'm not saying we should use candles. That is not. This is the middle way. But we are saying that we need to be responsible. We need to use computers. I cannot live without computers today. I still have to use computers. But how do I use it? I use it responsibly. Whenever you move out from your desk, you close the electricity so you do not waste electricity. You do not use. So there are many ways of reaching this middle way, the sustainable way of Buddhism. I think we should do it in our daily lives, in ourselves, with our friends, with our family, with our company, with our institutions.
If no one, may I ask one more?
Please.
I was supposed to ask you last week, but no time. When we talk about the plantation of the palm oil and using the palm oil, like Indonesia, deforestation. So it is very effective to the Singapore and Malaysia for the haze. We talk about this very seriously with Dr. Nyata. And then when he lived in the Singapore, they were very affected by breathing difficulty. And the haze this is an environmental issue and transnational crime. And is there any action about the Indonesian haze during the ASEAN? So I have no idea. They cannot stop this haze as a transnational crime. So I'm curious to know, but no time to ask you last week. That's why.
May I frame your question slightly different? Because you talk about Indonesia haze, and people in Singapore, in Malaysia, had to, they are addressed these haze problems. It leads to pollution. It leads to hardness of breathing. You find it very difficult to breathe, etc. So let me share with you one concept which is related to Buddhist economics. This is very important because, and I thank you for raising this, the issue of interconnectedness. Nowadays, I'm sure you have heard, I would like to introduce Manna and Uzen, the concept of butterfly effect. Yesterday in my lecture seminar, I was talking about butterfly effect. What is done in one part of the world, a small change, would lead to a huge change in a completely different part of the world. As you said, what happened in Indonesia, through deforestation, through palm oil, seriously affect the health of Singaporeans and Malaysians. So the question of interconnectedness, the question that Buddhist economists address, that you cannot be, the term we use is no man is an island. I cannot say, I do it for Indonesians. I don't care what the Singaporeans think. Let me do whatever I want. Let me get rid of my forest. But you'll be interested. The other day, I was watching a TV program where they were looking satellite images of Borneo, Sumatra, the Indonesian islands. What they find is all the green cover has gone. The carbon emission, which the trees give us, has gone. So the question is, you might say, an Indonesia farmer, palm oil company, we are producing palm oil. I don't care about what happened in Singapore. But Singaporeans are feeling the effects of what happened in palm oil. So the question of interconnectedness, of course, the question you raise is slightly different. I know what actions are being taken. I think it should be taken at a much higher level. But I think at the same time, we should recognize that we are all connected. We cannot say, I don't want to associate with anyone. I want to be on my own. This is not possible. Somehow, or rather, this is why the butterfly effect, this is a very important concept. There's something which happens in one part of the world invariably affects another part of the world in a much bigger, more harmful way. And you give a classic example of what happened in Indonesia, affecting what happened in the climate change, what happened in Singapore and in Malaysia. Now, another example you find, because of climate change, you now have the Himalaya mountains, the high tops mountain, the snow are melting much quicker. Because it is melting at a much quicker rate, what we now have, I'm sure you see the news of the floods in Pakistan. Now, the floods in Pakistan are due to the high rate of the ice and snow melting in the other parts of the mountains in the Himalayas. So the question is, this is why in Buddhist economics, we always talk about interdependent, that we rely on one another. We cannot just say, I will do whatever I want. This is my own property. I don't care the neighbors. But if you harm the neighbors, this is a violent act. If the haze in Singapore, the haze in Malaysia are affected by the palm oil deforestation in Indonesia, it is against the principle of Buddhist economics, which says, do no harm. Whatever you do should not lead to any harmful effects on what is affected, because we are all connected. We are not separate. We cannot stay alone. So this is a principle I hope that the Buddhist principle teaches us. As you rightly said, the Buddhist practices would help us think of how we are interdependent and how we are interconnected. So thank you so much. Thank you. So next week, we would have wisdom-based approach to economics. So this will be the 7th session, and the last session will be the way forward. This is the end of the 8th session program. So, and I hope you have your short essay and the long essays too. So based on what the Dean Office wants you to do, just share the essays when you are ready. If you are ready, just share it to me and I will do the needed. So I will talk to Dr. Devendra and then try to see what I can do. He's there already. So thank you.
Yes, hello, CI. Sorry,
Hello.
I was quite busy this day. I could not join your lecture.
No, don't worry, don't worry.
Anyway, I follow up your PowerPoint slide.
I will share with them these as soon as we finish the session. I will send to all of you so that you could share it. So as you did for me, Dr. Devendra, I think this time around too, I hope the 8 sessions will be compiled into an ebook. So it will remain at SSBU, so that for anyone who are interested in, those who are not taking a course but interested to learn more about Buddhist economists, they can have a good reference. I would just say a reference on Buddhist economists through my slide presentation. I will share with you. So thank you very much.
Yes.
So
Yes, Jay,
yeah, that's
can
great.
I say something? What about our presentation, or one more. There are two options. One is a summary instead of doing a presentation. And if you give us to do the presentation, we'll do it. If you don't give us, we need to summarize for example, your lectures. There are two things. If you ask us to do, we need to consider the time that we need to present, or the last semester, the last week, or when. I just would like to know that.
Excuse me, CIG. There is some subject that there is no presentation to. We have, there is no presentation and no summary too. We also have that, but that's your decision only, Homo. CIG. I don't know that this subject need presentation and summary. Yes or no? I don't know. But some subjects we don't have. We just only have to write 2 essays, not the 3. We just have only 2. And they count for the class discussion. They count for that. But I don't know promoting. I'm not sure that the summary or the presentation is included or not. Some subject we don't have to do because Buddhist ethics we don't need to do anything.
For me, I think the 2 essays, the short one and the long one would be enough.
Okay.
Because summarizing, what is the value of summarizing? Will be just repeating,
Yes.
8 sessions in a very short time. Presentations will be the same. So I do not see any value. But of course, if the university requires you to do it, I don't mind.
It depends on it depends on the lecturer.
For the lecture,
decision.
for me, if Dr. Devinda is agreeable, for me, the short essay and the long essay will be sufficient, because summarizing and making presentations to me would not add any real value. But of course, if you want to do it, if you say, okay, I want to summarize, I want to present, I would listen. That's okay too. It depends on you. But for me, what is important is the 2 essays. So if you focus on the 2 essays, and if, as Manan mentioned, other subjects do not require it, why are we making it more difficult for Buddhist economists? So forget it. No, just
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
2 essays. And I will check with Dr. Devendra if that is appropriate. I'm sure it is. So as Manan has mentioned, so if other subjects are following the same principles, I will do the same.
Okay.
For me, your attendance is more important. Your summary or presentation to me, if you want to do it, it's okay. Now, I would be willing to listen to your presentations, but it's okay. But I think what is important is for you to at least appreciate the subject, understand some of the important issues in the subject, and the 2 essays, I hope, the free choice essay for the short one and the long one would help you summarize what the 8 sessions are. Okay. So I think this is okay. So thank you very much. So next
Thank you
week.
so much. Thank you.
Thank you,
Okay.
Sia.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Thank you. All the best. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
You.